I've taken to asking everybody I meet as far as telling me their horror stories of, yeah, it's my neighbor who is, my neighbor who is one of the most stoic people I know. She hopped out of her car. She was so livid. She called it a 6-year-old, so it must have been a very young kid on an e-bike, swept across the Liebenheim Road going towards El Camino to get into the left turn lane, and probably shouldn't even have been on an e-bike. So, what? 3 weeks ago, somewhere in there. So, yeah, so.
Do you know about this? This thing right here, it's like the bike Santa, the corner right here in Laconia, you just kind of stand you just go out there, do you know that? Yeah. Do you think we should mention that? Like for volunteers?
That might be a good idea, yeah. Oh, Pastor, okay. I'm the deputy.
And what about this one? Contest? For an art and slogan that can be showcased at City Arts Nights, City View Cultural Arts Center for the upcoming day.
I think that's good. Because that, obviously it's not like.
And then just California Offensive Traffic Safety like great media tool for kid families. That's right here actually.
Good afternoon. I would like to call to order this special joint meeting of the Encinitas City Council, Mobility and Traffic Safety Commission, and Youth Commission for Wednesday, September 13th, 2023 at 4 p.m. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, we'll start with the City Council. City Councilmember Blackwell is absent. Councilmember Ehlers?
Here.
Councilmember Hinsey?
Here?
Deputy Mayor Lyons?
Here.
Mayor Kranz?
Here.
And we'll move to the Mobility and Traffic Safety Commission. Chair Hansberger? Vice Chair Troth? Commissioner Gross? Commissioner Johnson?
Present.
Commissioner Standifer is absent. Commissioner Thiele?
Here.
And Commissioner Wong.
Here.
Moving to the Youth Commission, Chair Balo?
Here.
Vice Chair Balo?
Here.
Commissioner Charles?
Here.
Commissioner Gonzalez?
Here.
Commissioner Kelly?
Here.
Commissioner Kessler? Absent. Commissioner Lesniewski?
Here.
Commissioner Ryan? Commissioner Ryan is absent. And Commissioner Sue?
Here.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, and thank you all for being here. I believe this is, well, it's the first in the 10 years that I've been on here that we've had a joint meeting with the Youth Commission. And needless to say, 2 commissions at once is a first. So we are going to be discussing a single agenda item, which is bike safety and mobility update on education and outreach and potential safety enhancement projects. We've been under a emergency declaration for a couple months now, and I think it's important that we have this opportunity to review what we've accomplished and what we still need to do. As I said during the meeting when we initially met to consider the emergency declaration, it isn't my intention to point fingers at any one group of people or another. All I'm trying to do is get everybody to focus a bit on ways that we can make getting around town safer, and that especially includes the use of bikes and walking. And I think it's especially important as well that we create an environment where young people are able to do the bike riding or walking as safely as possible also. And so We've been doing a number of things, and we're going to review many of those here today. But what I wanted to do is start off the meeting with a presentation. I asked Commissioner Gross to put together a PowerPoint presentation that talks about the conversation that we need to have about how we can make things safer. And he is an expert on micromobility, has started a few businesses up in the Bay Area, is now running his business here in Encinitas, and I think he has a lot of good things to say. I know I cross paths with him frequently when I ride my granddaughter to school at Paul Lake Central. He's taking his daughter. We both find that the ability to bike safely in Leucadia is something that we need to work on. And so we've had a number of conversations about that. And so I thought it would be good to invite him to make this presentation.
Thank you for the floor, Mayor Kranz, and to Councilmember Hinsey, who has also been inspirational and helped me put together this presentation. So just a bit of background. I think we all know why we're under the emergency declaration. I've been talking to a lot of parents. As Mayor Kranz mentioned, I have actually 2 kids at Paul Ecke, and then I also have a kid at YMCA preschool around the city a lot, talking to a lot of parents about safety. And I would say in general, the overwhelming feeling I get is people are very concerned and very, I hear a lot of, for people that don't know what I do personally, talk to a lot of dads at like the YMCA dad-daughter camping. You hear, oh man, these e-bikes are everywhere. These kids don't know what they're doing. And the more I think I was able to break it down and talk to them, ask deeper questions, I think ultimately there's just a lot of fear and a lot of concern for kids, for adults. And no one necessarily knows what to do. And I feel that same way as well. And so this presentation, I wanted to start by trying to give a little bit of historical context. Often when I don't have answers, I like to look at books and read history. And so I thought I'd share a little bit of this with you. So the title of my presentation is Get a Horse, How Encinitas Can Lead in the Future of Mobility. And so at the turn of the 20th century, there was a lot of consternation around cars, and specifically cars up against horses. So Get a Horse was an op-ed from the Standard Evening Post written by a gentleman who talked and argued basically in favor, with a lot of support from the city, that cars should be banned because they were loud, they were dangerous, they were breaking down, and we already had this very elegant solution in horses. So why do we need cars on the road? Does anyone know why we shouldn't have, why horses weren't necessarily that elegant solution that this op-ed was pointing out? A couple things. Someone say it? They're exhaust. Well, horses. The horses behind carriages on average urinate about 2 pints a day, and they have about 15 to 35 pounds of manure. And if you think about the cities at the time, at the turn of the 20th century, they were growing very quickly. And it was forecasted, actually, that London would be under 9 feet of manure by 1950 if the current paces of horses continued. I actually used to live in New York City. This is around the street from where I used to live. Very interesting picture, of course, of what Bedford looked like at the turn of the century because of the horses. So, of course, and this is London, of course, in 50 years, every street in London will be buried under 9 feet of manure, right? This was in London, I think they forecast they need 100,000 horses at the time by 1950 to carry people around. So in this vein, cars were an excellent solution. They were a new solution and then, of course, what we want to ask ourselves is, can there be other new solutions that can complement the car? Not saying there's anything wrong with the car. That's the first thing I want to make mention of, is the car is a very important part of how we move every day for Americans, for everyone around the world. And of course, we shouldn't just think, let's throw it out. But are there new solutions that can actually complement the car to make mobility even better? And the other thing I'd say is, as much as we talk about e-bikes and biking and the craze around it and maybe the boom coming out of the pandemic, I'd like to reframe it and think about the lens of this idea that it's actually the future of transportation that we're looking at. And the e-bike is the first mode that's really entering in a new way to move that doesn't always require a car. And so, as I mentioned at the beginning, I just want to reaffirm this. Parents are very scared for their children. I feel this way as a parent, and I talk to a lot of parents that feel this way. This is not necessarily a new trend as it relates to mobility. There's some fascinating data out there. This is a study actually looking at a city in the United Kingdom, where it mapped the previous generations and how far they were able to move without parents. And so if you went back to, in this case, they went all the way back to the great-grandfather, he was able to move within an 8-mile range without a parent. Then the grandfather was able to move within a 5-mile range, I believe. The mother was able to move within a mile range, and then the son is actually able to move within a 300-yard radius range from their parents, right? So we're under this big shift no matter what, where there's a lot of fear, and this lack of mobility is starting to show signs among children as being very bad, right? We've seen the rise of kids staying inside a lot. We've seen a lot of kids that are now more medicated, and one argument is this lack of mobility is not something that we're used to as children, and it's really having major impacts. I should also mention this is a study from England where, of course, it's not just about potentially mobility safety with cars. There was a lot of concern in the 80s and 90s, as I understand it, around things like kids being taken from their parents and such like that. So I don't want to say this is only a mobility issue. But I do want to mention, of course, that parents do have merited concerns when it comes to fear, not just beyond any sort of fear-mongering we might be seeing. So, for instance, we know that children around mobility in motor vehicles, crashes is one of the largest ways they'll die, and leads to adolescent deaths. As a country, the United States, while we have made tremendous progress on vehicular death, we are starting to lose ground to other affluent areas around the world. That's just a slide here showing that. And again, you can see it also in the regulation. From a government perspective, there's some tremendous regulation that led to some very big decreases in vehicular deaths, things like seatbelts, DUIs, crash testing, brake lights, airbags. That's started to taper off recently. Again, that's just more of a question of why can't we continue to make the dent, especially as we've seen in other areas around the world. And then probably the most staggering thing that I think a lot of people are very worried about is actually pedestrian deaths are now at a 40-year high. This inflection point that looks like it happened earlier in the 21st century. There's all sorts of theories around why this has happened. Phone use, heavier cars because of some of the regulation that was passed. Larger homeless communities in urban areas, fentanyl use, things like that. No matter what, there's something really wrong here, and it's very scary. And the other thing to mention is this is not necessarily like a rural phenomenon. This is actually a phenomenon where a lot of the increases are happening in urban areas. As far as I understand, the NHTCA would define Encinitas as an urban area, so we should catalog ourselves as an urban area. We're kind of part of this area where we're seeing a lot of increase in fatalities. As well. There's been a lot of really scary policies that I've heard from parents now concerned. This is San Francisco. San Francisco in 2020 decided they were no longer going to police traffic enforcement. This shows you basically it falling off a cliff during COVID. It was still kind of precipitously coming down even before COVID as they've moved away from police informants of traffic. It's basically on the ground now. At the same time, of course, deaths are at all-time highs in San Francisco as it relates to pedestrian and bike deaths. And again, this is not like an urbanist thing. This is actually, this month is the Pedestrian Safety Month, National Pedestrian Safety Month. This is like a meme, maybe the Youth Commission knows about memes really well. This is a Star Wars meme, sort of someone proclaiming it's Pedestrian Safety Month. And she's of course saying, well, you're gonna enforce the traffic laws this month, right? Like, oh no, we're not doing that anymore. That's pretty scary. But it is happening in certain urban areas. And I think this leads parents to be very concerned about the safety of their children. I do want to make a mention that a lot of people say, well, e-bikes are killing people. Let's just be clear, outside of the asterisks, e-bikes don't kill people. For anyone that maybe did better in science than I did, force tends to kill people. So Newton's second law of motion states that force equals mass times acceleration. Very important when we think about mobility deaths and what makes mobility deaths. And so I made this fun little emoji. Sorry. Oh, wow, look at like how that was interpreted on the computer. That's interesting. But basically, this is a collision matrix. So people hitting people tends not to do anything. Maybe that's how you fall in love. Bikes hitting people, that can lead to injuries, hardly ever death, very rare instances. But you can see the outside of the collision matrix shows you how death tends to occur in mobility situations. Another way to look at this, of course, 20-mile-per-hour accidents or collisions and what happens versus 40-mile-per-hour accidents. Again, then, of course, you can see by the leaderboard, if you look at the leaderboard on vehicles, it tends to be the light trucks and XUVs that lead the leaderboard in terms of number of deaths via those vehicles. Kids do need training. I want to point this out. I think the bill going through that I think is now delayed, but on licenses is a very good idea. I think what's happening here at the local level should be commended as it relates to training. The parents I've talked to at SDA who talk about the kids now going through the training is excellent. There is no question that training will help provide more order, give kids a good understanding, maybe even give them an outlet like the program now in California, the CHP doing the training. Kids look up to police officers a lot of times like it's different than their parents trying to tell them something to do. I think that kind of training is fantastic. But, I do worry, and I think even, of course, as a city I'm so proud of, the press and the positioning of some of like the ways that, of course, the terrible things that have happened in our city with traffic violence has positioned us as trying to tell the e-bikers they might have done something wrong or, they're at fault. I think we got to be really careful there, especially as parents are concerned and potentially want their kids now not using bikes and walking, but, let's get them in the SUV, let's get them to move around. Kelly shared a stat with me that, someone in Carlsbad did the research and said that, 35% of all trips are parents ushering kids to and from school, right? That all the trips in Carlsbad, right? That's a wild amount of trips that I hate to see happen in Encinitas if kids aren't able to have their own ways of moving around. I also want to point out that adults need training, right? This new revolution, these new modes, we need to rethink how we actually drive in our vehicles as well. And again, just a small point, I don't want to make light of this or also call anyone out, but this is the announcement we got from the Paul Ecke, from our school, Paul Ecke Central, where it's like, hey parents, please avoid like texting while driving in the line. It just really kind of makes my hair raise, right? Like, we think distracted driving. I know I've talked to Sergeant Collis, who believes distracted driving is the #1 issue for safety in Encinitas. Like, I think we need to really come down on the idea that texting while driving is illegal. It shouldn't be done at all. It'd be like, saying like, please don't drink and drive while you're in the line, right? It's that dangerous. And of course, we know drinking and driving leads to deaths, and so does texting. And then just to look at our statistics, right? Yes, we have kids without helmets on. Yes, we have kids riding on sidewalks, but we have a lot of people in our city speeding. We have a lot of people driving distracted. This is June data. Sergeant Collis shared the August data where distracted driving is up even more. So yeah, we've got a lot of problems with our city, but we've got some kind of fat areas that if we can work on could solve a lot of our traffic violence, I believe. And so to Mayor Kranz's point, and something I think we all believe in, right? Like that are here, that care. Like we're a city that believes people have the right to walk and bike around this beautiful city. And I think we've done a lot to make that happen. And I think you see a lot of participants of that in our city to the point where we're almost a bit of a national spectacle now. And again, it's fun. Like, I'm not sure who's seen the one wheel with the lawn chair out there. It was my first time seeing him. I guess he's a bit of a legend. But this is on Leucadia Boulevard, right? Like, what a fun way to move around. He's in the bike lane. Looks a little bit dangerous. And then, at the same time, I live by here. I watch this area. Like, Leucadia Boulevard's not that safe. Our roundabouts and the way they're structured, like, it leads for a lot of speed that goes into and exiting roundabouts. We have a lot of light poles down, collisions, things like that. So it's fun to see someone like that, but I do worry a little bit. Wow, is that the safest way to get around if these areas aren't better policed, if they're not made to be safer? Here's a little girl going to Paul Ecke Central. She looks like the defiant girl in front of the Wall Street Bull in New York, right? Like, this is a terrifying thing to see if you're a parent. There's no crosswalk. For legal reasons, we can't have a cross guard out there. But, like, who's going to be brave enough? Who's going to say, like, let's break through the legal barriers here? This is not a way for a girl to have to ride to school up against, like, really large vehicles that maybe can't even see her because their hoods are so high. We need to do more, I believe, to protect her because she's doing the right thing by riding her bike to school. And so why should everyone root for this? Again, I want to make sure that this is a big tent. This is the 80% argument. I really don't, this is not about, just getting bikers and walkers on board or saying that cars are bad. Everyone should root for Encinitas being a city where we can bike or walk. And why is that? Even if you'll never pick up a bike or never want to walk in your life, There's some really good data out there that says like these are real trends that are shifting, right? So I apologize, I'm not hitting these buttons right. The first one is teenagers don't want to drive anymore. Since 1990, basically, driver license is down by 50%. So from 64% in 1995 to just under 40% in 2021. So 50% decline, roughly, in the number of kids that are actually getting their licenses, right? Which is pretty interesting to watch. The other thing is cars are incredibly unaffordable at this time. So we're at the all-time high for new cars prices, almost $50,000. More recently, the phenomenon of interest rates going up. Almost all cars are financed now. Clearly, these kids don't, or people don't have to buy new cars, but cars are becoming almost unaffordable for a certain population. And then more recently, this is just out this week. This is Bloomberg NEF, showing that if you care about climate, if you care about emissions, the data is showing that actually the biggest dent to emissions globally is coming from two-wheeled electric vehicles, electric bikes, basically. Oh, and this is done without any government incentives. We know about the government incentives happening for cars in our country. It's having very little impact versus electric bikes. So if you care about the climate, this, of course, is showing us that the real displacement that's happening is happening because of electric bikes. And then finally, and we see this at Paul Ecke, for instance, with a bow wow that we did last week. I think this is telling me to get off stage. Sorry. Again, with the bow wow last week, it was amazing to see how much traffic reduction there was when the kids biked and walked to school. And this is a study that shows that there's a study out there that shows that a 10% shift from cars to bikes results in 40% less traffic congestion. So it doesn't have to be everyone, but if we can consistently shift modes, we can reduce traffic congestion, which we know creates a better quality of life, which we know, of course, a lot of people that drive cars would really like to get into. So it's this attitude that even if I don't want to get on the bike, let's cheer the people on that do. Let's try to support them. Let's try to do what we can for them because we're all in this together and it's going to get me where I want to go safer and more efficiently. So instead of get a horse, I think we should say, get an e-bike or drive your car. But importantly, we're all in this together. So thank you.
Thank you for that. And, that thesis that we are a city that believes people can ride and walk as a mobility solution is one that I think is really important to keep front of mind. And it's one of the reasons why I thought it was very important that we have the Youth Commission here because we need your thoughts and ideas about how we can advance that idea that we are a city that wants to be able to walk and ride as a mobility solution. So we don't have push buttons to talk here tonight, so if you've got something that you'd like to say, raise your hand, and you're welcome to come up and speak.
All right, just right here. All right, my name is Carter Ballou, and I am the chairman for the Encinitas Youth Commission, and I was kind of excited to come here because as the Youth Commission, we've had on our agenda items for last year and this year to work on e-bike safety, especially when youth is so important in this, debate. So I guess as a brief overview, as a Youth Commission, we've kind of been working on bringing in speakers to address the Youth Commission to talk about not only youth bikers, but also youth drivers, because we've seen that it's really important from both ends of the spectrum to work on this issue collaboratively. And so for me at least, I've been driving for 1 year, I've been e-biking, and I've been running, so I've kind of seen it all. I'm on the cross-country team. I don't know if you can tell that I came here just from practice. But as I'm running around, I see a lot of problems with e-biking around SDA, which is where I go, especially in the parking lot. I've seen substantial improvements from the signs over there being put in front of the front lot and the back lot. I think that's a really good solution. But I'd just like to kind of highlight one of my experiences, at least e-biking. So I got my e-bike down in kind of downtown San Diego. I didn't really need any training except for like a 45-minute session there. And then I brought it up here, and the first time I was e-biking, I was turning right from Quail Gardens onto Leucadia Boulevard, and it's a yield to the straight, and I had no idea what that meant. So I just completely cut off a driver. They had to lay on the horn, and I was very close to getting hit on that specific occasion. So I guess from my perspective, at least from the youth's perspective as well, I would like to see more involvement in the schools. I remember last year we had some improvements with the CAS testing week. We had speakers go into the grades that weren't 11. CAS testing is only required for 11th graders. So 10th graders, 9th graders, and 12th graders all got presentations. I thought that was really helpful. And although I can't really address specific solutions because I don't really know where that falls, I think it's important to introduce the idea of maybe brochures, more speakers at schools, and also more classes, whether they be obligatory or optional, into at least the hands of the youth so that there's more resources for us. Yeah, we're definitely a target group for this. That's pretty much all I have.
Great, and do you agree that we should be a more bikeable and walkable
100%.
community? And are you hearing that from your friends, that they're interested in riding more?
Yeah, especially the underclassmen are really taking advantage of this opportunity. I think it's a good way to become more physical, especially as a runner.
Okay, thank you. Any council questions or comments about the presentation? Okay, commissioners? Okay.
Oh, this mic doesn't work, or does it? It does. Okay. My name is Glenn Johnson. I'm a member of the Mobility and Traffic Safety Commission, and I'm a parent and a grandparent. The big issue here, of course, is behavior modification for both the motorists and the bicyclists. And even the motorists from out of town sometimes are out of order. I'd like to see us teach mutual respect on all sides, and perhaps have some signage around the city to enforce the idea of respecting. I think we need to have some very clear rules for bicycles written down at about a 6th grade reading level would be good, and distribute those rules not just to the bicyclists in the schools, but also to all of the citizens of Encinitas. Something for the motorists can understand. You go into Encinitas, this is a special place. I'd like to see enforcement. We have things like 3 people on a bicycle. We have riders without helmets. We have drivers who drive in the bike lane regularly. And most of these people get away from it. Of course, we'd like to see connected routes throughout the city for bicyclists rather than a patchwork network. If I were interested in real mobility, I'd think about having some kind of a minibus transportation system so we don't need so damn many cars. Of course, signs and pavement markings, separate roadways for bicycles would be wonderful if we could afford them. The rules need to cover things like riding on sidewalks. I don't know where and when a bicycle should be on a sidewalk. There are also other vehicles here, electric scooters, skateboards, electric wheelchairs, that we need consideration for. Respect is the word I'm after again. And I'd like to thank the other 2 speakers for getting their word across.
Thank you, Glenn. Okay, that brings us to staff. Is there another commissioner? Come on up.
Hello, Mayor and Council. I'm Commissioner Sophia Gonzalez. So we have a lot of e-bikers in our community, obviously, increasing numbers of elementary, middle school, and high schoolers, all e-biking. I know that at some schools, they require a class now that you have to take in order to e-bike to school. And I feel like that should be expanded upon. I feel like more high schoolers and middle schoolers should need to take this class because I know I e-bike to school starting out as like a freshman and sophomore, and I didn't learn anything about road safety before that. I didn't have my license, nothing like that. So having these classes and actually having them required, I feel like would be very helpful for kids to learn the rules of the road and how to safely navigate their way through, whether they're walking, biking, e-biking, or even just driving to school.
Thank you, Sophia. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about that in the presentation coming up. We've got our mobility manager, Nick Buck, and City Traffic Engineer Bannigan are going to give us a presentation on the activities that have taken place since we declared the emergency.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Crayons, members of the council, and our commissioners and guests present. I'm Nick Buck. I'm the city's mobility manager, and I'll be sharing with you an update on education and community outreach, and then we'll hand the presentation off to our sheriff's department and our traffic engineer to discuss potential mobility and safety enhancements. Looking at background, on June 28th, the City Council adopted resolution number 2023-86, titled A Resolution of the City Council of the City of Encinitas ratifying the Director of Emergency Services proclamation of the existence of a local emergency and continuing the proclamation of the local emergency for bicycle, e-bicycle, and motorized mobility device safety. It's a mouthful, really. Some immediate actions that were taken, these were things that have been completed to date. Public awareness: in mid-July, the city designed and produced 300 yard signs, which you can see some examples of up here, for residents, businesses, and schools to display to increase awareness with messages reminding drivers to be alert and cyclists to get there safe. The city also placed 10 CMS message boards throughout the city with safety messages. An additional 10 CMS boards were placed near schools when the school year started. Education, the city launched a new safety and mobility webpage, which we'll look at in just a moment. On the enforcement end, a new bike ordinance went into effect on July 28th, which allows for a diversion program offered for bike citations for first-time offenders. And we'll talk more about engineering, but engineering staff completed an evaluation of city infrastructure to identify fast and feasible safety enhancements related to cycling. Future actions, staff will of course continue to add digital content, including safety and instructional videos. Currently, staff have a project list of about 20 videos in the queue to produce that have topical messaging for drivers and cyclists to improve safety and education in Encinitas. In August, the city doubled its offerings of bike education classes, and in September, we're tripling our efforts. We'll also be adding programs in a webinar format to increase capacity for people to receive that education. Staff continues to meet with our school contacts to develop appropriate education programs to meet the school's needs. And additionally, in partnership with the city's bike share provider, B-Cycle, the city is working towards certification of up to 16 new league cycling instructors to support education efforts locally. And in just a minute, our traffic engineer will present potential capital projects to enhance cycling and pedestrian safety. I mentioned the yard signs, and those are the yard signs right up here, and definitely encourage you all to grab some of those signs that are available in the lobby at City Hall, also available at the community center. The intent there is for the public to pick those up, put them on their property, in their yard, at their place of business, or places where they think that they would have impact in the community. So we're happy to see that those are appearing around town, and we'll continue with that approach. And the messaging you can see is, aimed at both drivers and cyclists, and with the messaging to ride safe and drive safe. So be sure to pick some of those up. I mentioned the CMS boards as well, that there are 10 around the city, 10 more at schools. That's what those look like on the slide there. We'll talk about video content. Like I mentioned, the city has a project list of a lot of videos to come. Our approach with those videos is that we intend to work with Bike Walk Encinitas and other stakeholders to make sure that their insights and expertise help us to get to a product that resonates well with the public. We'll take a look at a short format video that was optimized for social media that's about the use of the Cardiff 101 cycle track.
Along the west side of Highway 101, the city of Encinitas has a separated cycle track. To enter while heading northbound, cyclists who are on the east side of the 101 will need to cross traffic at the crosswalk on Chesterfield next to the Kook. The cycle track is a two-way track for cyclists, separated from pedestrians and cars. To exit the cycle track, cyclists can use the Swami's Ped Crossing crosswalk. Another option while exiting northbound is to turn left onto K Street into downtown.
The city, in partnership with the San Diego County Sheriff's Department, recently completed a longer format video speaking from a public safety perspective. This video promotes the city promotes the sharing of videos like these to increase roadway safety. This is, like I said, a longer format video that I'll play. It's about 2 minutes long.
Hello everyone, my name is Josh Gordon and I am the fire chief for the Encinitas Fire Department. With me today is Christopher Lawrence, captain of the San Diego Sheriff's Department assigned to Encinitas. We are here to talk about an important topic that affects the safety of our community members, bicycle and electric bike safety.
That's right, Chief. With the increasing popularity of bicycles and electric bikes, it's crucial that we all understand the importance of practicing safety while enjoying these modes of transportation.
First and foremost, we always wear a properly fitted helmet. Whether you're riding a bicycle or an electric bike, your helmet is your most important piece of safety equipment. It can protect your head and prevent serious injuries in case of a collision.
Absolutely, Chief. It's also essential to follow traffic rules and signals, just as you would in a car. Obey traffic signs, use hand signals when turning, and be mindful of pedestrians. Remember, sharing the road is a collective responsibility.
When riding at night or during low visibility conditions, make sure your bicycle or electric bike is equipped with front and rear lights. These lights will make you more visible to motorists, reducing the risk of
Collisions. And for electric bike riders, be familiar with the local regulations regarding speed limits and where electric bikes are allowed. It's important to know the rules to ensure the safety of both riders and pedestrians.
Yeah, maintaining your bicycle or electric bike is crucial for your safety as well. Regularly check your tires, brakes, and other components to ensure they are in good working order. If you notice any issues, have them addressed promptly by a professional.
Additionally, we encourage riders to dress appropriately. Wear bright colors and reflective clothing to increase your visibility on the road. It's also a good idea to use your mirrors to enhance your situational awareness and keep an eye on approaching vehicles.
Lastly, never underestimate the power of education. Consider taking a bike safety course or attending workshops to learn essential skills such as defensive riding techniques. The more knowledge you have, the safer you'll be on the road.
That's right, Chief. By practicing these safety measures, we can all contribute to a safer community and reduce collision involving bicycles and electric bikes.
Remember, safety starts with you. We care about your well-being and we want you to enjoy riding while staying safe.
Thank you for joining us today. Let's work together to ensure everyone's safety on our roads.
Here we're looking at our safety and mobility web presence. Our project team is grateful to our IT department here at the city for working quickly to develop a new safety and mobility area on the city website that has a prominent location for content about bike and pedestrian and driver safety. We've consolidated content from various departmental pages into one place where we focus on infrastructure, education, laws, and from this page we'll also share resources such as maps and routes and highlight mobility news and promote events and activities. There's also information on this page that's relevant for drivers so that they learn and understand more about interacting with cyclists and pedestrians in our streets. Of course, we'll continue to add content as we go, but this was a big step to get us closer to making public information more readily available. And now I'll hand the presentation off to our sheriff's captain.
Thank you, Nick. So just to go over some of the enforcement efforts, Mayor, Council, and Commissioners. Every month, we write approximately 200 citations related to motor vehicles, and that's with moving violations, so not equipment violations, but this is speed, this is distracted driving related to cellular phone use. So as of the proclamation of the emergency, it's roughly about 600 citations that have been issued to drivers. I'd like to point out, and I believe the city manager provided you with information as well, that we've done several motor strike teams, and that's thankfully to Sergeant Collis, who's sitting behind me. He coordinates those. He is the department's motor sergeant for the entire department, and thankfully we have him here at our station. But recently on August 30th, he and his team brought together 45 different motor officers and deputies from across the county to work Del Mar, Solana Beach, and the city of Encinitas as well. And just in that 4.5-hour period, we were able to write 184 citations in Encinitas alone. So as you can see, there's a need for safer driving in our communities. A lot of that was speed and distracted driving. So these are steps that we're taking to increase the outreach and awareness within the community. As you can see, they're related to bike citations. 66 have been written since this became our real focus. 59 of those have either completed diversion or they're in the diversion program currently. So again, that allows our first-time offenders to attend one of the 3-hour safety classes offered by the San Diego Bike Coalition. So we're thankful for their partnership. And anecdotally, hearing from my deputies out in the street and from a lot of the citizens who I come in contact with, they are noticing a lot more compliance and safer riding from our bicyclers and e-bikers around the city. So those are things that I like to hear. And a lot of that is represented in the data that you see below in the bottom tables. So 2022, excuse me, total e-bike collisions was 44 in the city at the time of this data poll. Currently, to date, we're at 15. There's only 3 months left in the year, so we're hoping, and we're thankful for the education efforts that the city has partnered with us as well, and the schools, that we're really reducing the amount of collisions. And paired with manual bike collisions as well, we're hoping the projection is to be about half of the collisions that we were at the year 2022 is where we'll finish 2023. So I'd love to report on a zero, but I'm not sure if that will ever be possible. But as close as we can get to that, working with everyone and continuing our education efforts, that's our goal. So I'll hand it back over to our traffic engineering with Abe.
All right, thank you, Captain. Good evening, Mayor, members of public, council members, our commissioners, Abe Bandigan, City Traffic Engineer. We have, as promised at the council meeting where we had the emergency declaration, we quickly, with our small team, went over our current infrastructure in the city and identified potential quick, feasible improvements that can be implemented in the shortest amount of time to improve and enhance our safety for our bicyclists in the city. This first slide is the projects that we had funded this year, already designed and in process for implementation. 4 projects on the bottom, you can see the locations: South 101 between F and K in downtown area, Vulcan Avenue close to City Hall between Encinitas and E, Manchester Avenue between I-5 and North ECR, basically where Manchester turns east toward Rancho Santa Fe, that corridor east of the freeway, and South Rancho Santa Fe. This is not Rancho Santa Fe, this is just the easterly leg of the intersection of Rancho Santa Fe and Encinitas Boulevard, where it takes Encinitas Boulevard towards city limits. These 4 streets, they have striping plans that were blessed by the Traffic Commission and the City Council and are being implemented shortly. They are funded and already approved. We did a quick review of our infrastructure as mentioned. This map, there are copies on that small table over there in case somebody wants to take a better look. We have 40, 50 copies over there. This shows the potential projects that we identified that, as mentioned, are feasible. They're not multi-million-dollar projects. They're not infeasible. There's no right-of-way issues, no major widening or narrowing. There's no major environmental associated with any of these. So they're implementable pretty quickly. And the categories of the projects, you can see them on the right: new bike lanes, sharrows, buffers, additional signage, bike boxes, cross bikes, and the lowering speed limits, which I will talk about. First category, some new bike lanes in the city. As we know, everybody likes them. They created dedicated path of travel for our bicyclists. The locations that were identified: Saxony Road, Westlake, and Village Parkway. They are areas that we identified that can benefit from a new bike lane, and there is an opportunity there to implement new bike lanes. Two-stage bike boxes. These are new to the city. In the county, there has been very few that were recently installed. City of San Diego has done some. And around the country, they are pretty fast being widespread. Every city is starting to use them. They create this opportunity for bicyclists to basically turn left at intersections at two stages. One, they follow the intersection to the far side using the green with the through traffic, and then stop at a waiting area that's square-shaped. And then when the opposing leg gets their green, they go through again with the through movement. So it's basically a left turn done with two stages, kind of like what we would do if we were crossing the intersection as a pedestrian. We would cross one leg and then wait for our green and then cross the other leg. This would eliminate the whole conflict that would arise from a bicyclist who wants to get into a left turn pocket at a signalized or unsignalized intersection, having to cross multiple through lanes to get into a left turn pocket and then turn left with the vehicles. 4 locations identified: Encinitas at Vulcan, Encinitas at Belur, Encinitas at El Camino Real, and the Manchester at Maricosta College. Next category, potential new buffers. These are locations that already have bike lanes, but there is an opportunity to implement some lane narrowing options and add good buffers that would create more protection and separation for our bicyclists on ECR, on Garden View, and Manchester. Potential shadow markings similar to what we're showing we had on 101. We still had having multiple areas of the city. These are locations that we anticipate lower speed of traffic, less conflict, lower volume of traffic, lower class roads. We have it on Saxony, Requesa, and Nardo, based on our active transportation plan and our evaluations of the corridors, volumes, and speeds. We think these are good options to implement sharrows. Cross bikes, you've seen the most recent one for sure that we did at Chesterfield with the cycle track project. These are basically parallel crossing locations parallel to our existing crosswalks for pedestrians where bicyclists get to cross from corner to corner. You see on the left the one that we recently did at Chesterfield, and the one on the right is at Davis. There are 3 locations that we've identified: Encinitas at Belur, Encinitas at Via Cantabria, and Santa Fe at El Camino. Potential new signage for school signage for advanced warning to drivers about what's going on at schools, in advanced schools where there are potential crossing happening at different areas in the vicinity of the schools. There are different locations that were identified. We can add these traffic calming and these warning signage associated with the school at these locations. Not going to go through all of them. And this table shows our current approximate, I guess, back of a napkin, 30,000 feet cost for the projects that I just went through. The categories on the left, you can see them. The signage piece obviously can be implemented ASAP, minimal design required. The other categories, we think we would need about 2 to 3 months of design work. We will come back, if blessed tonight, obviously supported by council, we will come back based on, I guess, the size of the project selected, the funding availability. We will come back in 2 to 3 months with a design amenity package with full design, full, more accurate cost estimate. I will present the final designs to City Council. The rough estimate right now is about $525,000, which is basically some of the three separate accounts that we have a general mobility account, we have a safe routes to school account, and we have a innovative bike lanes account that annually get a total of 225,000, total of 525, and this basically would consume all those three accounts annual funding, but it is feasible. Now, obviously, council can provide us direction with regards to which ones to pick, if we want to phase it, if we want to eliminate some projects or add something else. We're here tonight to hear council's thoughts and commissioners' thoughts and get direction for future steps. Thank you. Oh, infrastructure is done. This is, we talked a lot about AB 43. This is one piece of AB 43, the state law that would allow us to implement lower speeds in the city. One piece of the legislature allows implementing 25 mile per hour speed limits in business districts. We can establish business district, and the definition of business district in the new Assembly bill does allow us to implement it in downtown between D Street and K, and we kind of incorporate. We think it's very relevant. It's not infrastructure, obviously, but we think it's very relevant and it's very beneficial. So we don't want to wait for July 24, where the rest of AB 43 kicks in. We think it's a good addition to all these other infrastructure opportunities that we have. So we added this to the list of projects that we're planning on doing. Thank you. I'm open to questions.
Okay, thank you. I do have a couple of council members requesting to speak. Would you mind if we heard from the public first? Okay, would the city clerk please call?
Absolutely, I'll call you three at a time. A reminder that you do have 3 minutes. Donna Westbrook, Nancy, thank you, Michael von Neumann.
Donna Westbrook, Encinitas. One of the things that you've been doing, and whether you know it or you've done it, is that the lanes, the vehicle lanes, have been narrowed from 12 feet to 10 feet. And sometimes it looks even narrower. And that makes it difficult if someone pulls in front, pulls next, or whatever, to safely stop or get out of the way. Now, if you can leave the vehicle lanes as they are at 12 feet, that would be fine. But since you don't have enough road, then what you're doing is putting everybody into a dangerous position. Second, you do not have an EIR on how you plan to put this based on the streets that they're showing, because we used to have a policy that if we were going to put in, let's say, calming effects, whatever that might be, that at least they would get an idea how everybody in the neighborhood who uses those lanes would, how they feel that it would affect them. We don't do that anymore. It was changed to we only need 2 or 3 people to complain, and we're immediately going to change everything. That's not the good thing to do, and have an EIR on what will happen when you start directing traffic from one place or one area to another neighborhood. You may find that you've got more people deciding they don't want to go down with, a lot of bikes, and they go off to a different area. You haven't discussed that. You think everybody's going to be happy with the bikes. That's not going to work. If you don't think about it, it does happen. Third, what is really disturbing is that you don't think about as far as the bikes and your restriping. I was on El Camino today, and you have all these green stripes that lead into turns. The problem is it doesn't tell anybody, based on what the state law is, that vehicles have to stay 3 feet away from a bicyclist. Well, that doesn't work if the bicyclist wants to be next to the line that your car is next to. And that happened today. It wasn't an e-bike. It was a person on a regular bike, an adult. And he did not want to stay, quote, in the bike lane. So he was out next to the cars. Now, how do you stop that? Who knows? But if you want to do signage, put a sign up and say, please do not, decrease the 3 foot that a car must stay away from you based on state law. The other thing you should do, since you are looking at design immunity, which you haven't told people, is put signs up and say, we have declared this a design immunity city, and therefore, if you get hurt, we have a resolution that means that you cannot sue us. So
Thank
put
you.
up those signs.
Nancy DeJano, followed by Michael Von Neumann, and then Judy Burlfine.
Good afternoon, Mayor, council members, and commissioners. My name is Nancy DeGano, and I live in Leucadia. Bicycle safety is personal to me, as I used to be a cyclist, and my father, husband, and son have all been seriously injured by cars while riding bikes. They were all disobeying the rules of the road. My father was in his 70s and riding on the sidewalk against the flow of traffic. My husband was 11 years old and darted out of the driveway onto the street, 6 weeks in the hospital. My son was 14. I had taken him, his bike, and his helmet to his friend's house across town. He went riding without his helmet, decided to show off going no hands, and ended up on the street and curb with a traumatic brain injury. A quarter inch further in one direction, and he'd be in a wheelchair drooling for the rest of his life. And I'm the stickler mom who won't let her kid ride 4 houses down on a dead-end street without a helmet. I want to read some excerpts from a post on Nextdoor written by a woman about her son. Because he's been riding for a while, I decided to go check out his driving skills discreetly just to make sure he's following the rules of the road. I was at Urania and Leucadia at a stoplight. The light turned green and all the cars started to go and then stopped because 3 boys on their e-bikes were turning left from Leucadia onto Urania. They all ran a full-on red light. As I watched them, my son, 13 and a half, was right behind them. I literally started shaking. So I was going to make him take one of those driving courses before he could ever ride it again. But that's BS. He knows not to go through a red light. The course would do nothing. I really thought he was more responsible. His excuse? I was just trying to keep up. I despise these bikes, and there's a reason you need to be 16 to drive a car. I don't know what good the classes would do when they already know the most road rules but don't follow them. The reason for posting this is, even if you think you have the most responsible child on the planet, go check and see how they're doing with navigating with traffic, stoplights, stop signs, keeping up with their friends, etc. I almost didn't even go check because he's very responsible. I know everyone says e-bikes are here to stay, but it shouldn't be for children, and it doesn't mean that there's not an irresponsible driver nearby. Most everything staff is suggesting here tonight is helpful and commendable, but without law enforcement and repercussions directed at these e-bike riders I affectionately call free radicals, and their parents, we are not going to see the changes we want and need to see. Please provide more enforcement for cars and bikes. By our city code definition, according to the sheriff, bikes are considered vehicles and must abide by traffic rules plus bicycle safety rules. Nothing changes without enforcement. And please educate all of the public on bike boxes. We are not familiar, and we want to be. Thank you for your efforts and attention to this important safety matter.
Good evening, council, commissioners, staff. My name is Michael Von Neumann. I live in Encinitas, and I drive a car. I walk difficultly, but I do walk, and I also ride a bike. If anyone is driving behind me, I try to go 5 miles below whatever the posted speed limit is. So if that aggravates you, I apologize ahead of time. But I just want to say that I'm really excited about some of these changes going forward. It's about time. I like the accelerated approach to doing some of these things, and I look forward to seeing even more of them. The one thing that stood out from the proposals that was presented was the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit downtown, reclassifying that as a business district. I also want to mention that there are some other streets that we could reclassify as business districts, warranting a 25-mile-an-hour prima facie speed limit. And that is San Elijo Avenue between Birmingham and Chesterfield, Encinitas Boulevard between Coast Highway and Quail Gardens Road, and also El Camino Real between Encinitas Boulevard and Lucadia Boulevard. In addition, we could also take a look at some streets and get them reclassified as residential areas. And those are Vulcan Avenue between La Costa and Santa Fe, San Elijo Avenue between Santa Fe and Birmingham, Villa Cardiff Drive between McKinnon and Windsor, Ballure Drive between Encinitas Boulevard and Santa Fe, and Saxony Road between Lucadia Boulevard and Quail Hollow Drive. How do you get these things reclassified as residential districts? It's just a process where you have to let the state of California know that you are taking those streets off of the state highway or road system map, and then they can be reclassified as residential streets. The downside for that is once they are not on the highway or the state highway map, is they may not be eligible for grants, but they can also be put back on that map. If you're thinking, well, we need to repave this road 2 years from now, we need grant money, we can put it back on that map. So I'm really excited about the lowering the speed limits, and this is a great start. Thank you.
Next speaker is Judy Burlfine, followed by Logan Brown, and then Aaron Hebsche.
Hi, Judy Burlfine. Thank you all for coming and for sharing. Love hearing your thoughts about being e-bike riders. I want to second what Michael said. I talk with a lot of bike riders, some vehicular cyclists, some 8 to 80 cyclists, which I consider myself through Encinitas Bike Walk. And the only thing that all of us agree on is slowing the speeds. Everything else we fight and argue over, but slowing speeds is something that we all agree on. So I think that's a really high priority. I want to thank Abe for working with us at Encinitas Bike Walk and presenting all of these safety recommendations. I think what people are struggling with is the rapidity, I don't know if that's a word, how fast things are changing and the streets look different and what does the green paint mean and what do the bike boxes mean. And so I think our goal has to be to provide as much order and clarity as possible for the cyclists and for the drivers, because right now nobody knows who belongs where. And I think all of these recommendations help to provide more order and clarity by having more bike lanes close to schools, by having better buffers, and by having sharrows in those places where we just can't fit a bike lane. And then lastly, I love the bike box idea. It's something a little bit new and might be a little bit confusing, but lots of us would like to ride to Sprouts or somewhere on El Camino Real, but we have no interest in crossing 3 lanes of traffic to make a left turn. So to make the bikes fit in when they make their left turn would be really helpful, because right now I ride to the corner, I go up on the sidewalk, I push the button, I maneuver, I get off my bike. Sometimes it's really steep and I almost fall over. So if there were a place for me to wait while I'm making that 2-stage turn, that would be super helpful. So thank you so much for addressing this. I hear people talking about it all the time. I was at Rotary today where our sheriffs came and Nico came and a fabulous middle school principal and talked about bike safety and got to hear all the concerns of people in our community. So I think the more we approach it from infrastructure and from enforcement and from education, the better off we are. So thank you all so much.
And thanks that all that you're doing in the Bike Walk organization.
Hi, I'm Logan Brown. I'm a 9th grader from LCC. I live in Olevenhain. I'm just going to address some of the concerns I have for e-bike safety, cars and stuff like that. But one of the incidents that I always have is when I'm at a main intersection and I'm waiting to go forward, and the bike lane is where a car can turn and they wait behind you because they don't need a green light to do that. So while I'm waiting there, they're laying the horn at me. They're doing anything they can for me to try to move over. And I just think that problem needs to be resolved because many cars don't understand that's where the bike lane is and you can wait there, and that's just one of them. Also, share lanes. Many cars, don't look down at the road to see a share lane sign that's painted on. I think there needs to be signs that say share lane very clearly because cars get very upset at me for no reason, and I have as much right as they do driving in that area. Also, just honestly, attitude and how people treat us. Bikes make many mistakes as well as cars, but people in cars, particularly more upperclassmen, they will throw things at you, honk at you, shoot Orbeez guns at you, throw trash at you, and just so many other things. And it's just so dangerous and really hard to drive, knowing that that can just happen to you at any minute. Just the other day, I saw an ambulance at my school because of a bike crash right outside of my school. There's so many cars that park in bike lanes. I see it going by OPE or honestly a lot of places, and so bikes have to go around cars, and cars have to fit when bikes go in the car lane. So I think that needs to be addressed as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Aaron Hepshe. I live in Leucadia. Thank you all for declaring the state of emergency, because I agree, that's what we're in. We're in a crisis. It's a safety crisis. It's also a climate crisis. It's a crisis of our kids being sheltered and being stuck at home and not being able to get out and be who they want to be. So all of that is going to be a lot of work to undo. And we're starting tonight. I shouldn't say we're starting tonight. We've been on this track for a while, but I'd love to see what's being proposed by the traffic engineer. The city recently hired Nick Buck as a mobility manager. So thank you for doing that, moving this issue forward. Just a few additional suggestions to what Abe, the traffic engineer, had proposed. The bike boxes are great. I love that idea. Adding buffers on the bike lanes are great, increase safety. I would like to disagree with one of the previous speakers about maintaining 12-foot width street lanes, travel lanes for cars. We know the science says that you reduce the width of a travel lane and it slows down vehicular speed. And that's a really easy way to get that done with just a simple engineering solution. So thank you for considering that. I was disappointed to see that the proposal for a bike lane on Saxony isn't going to go through that whole stretch between Leucadia and Encinitas Boulevard. That it stops at the Like Tag Foundation and then turns into a Sharrow, which is not safe because speeds are still in the 40-mile-an-hour range north of Like Tag Foundation all the way to Leucadia Boulevard. Sharrow is not appropriate there. We should just get those parked cars off of that stretch of street and turn it into a bike lane all the way through. And I think that's all for today. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Mayor, that does conclude speakers.
Thank you to all the members of the public who spoke. Jim, we'll get to you in just a minute. Let's go through the folks up here. Councilmember Hinsey.
Thank you. So I'll try to keep it brief. I think today was mostly about listening. For our part, we gave a lot of direction when we first declared this emergency, and so now we're hearing everything that's been accomplished. And hearing everything that's been accomplished, it's tremendous. Your efforts obviously have been so well received and pinpointed, and just the collaboration between the 3 E's, which are the force behind Vision Zero, the education, enforcement, and engineering. Each one of those has been addressed. So I would really like to commend our staff and the Sheriff's Department, and also the focus from both the Mobility Commission and the Youth Commission. I think it's hard for us to do anything up here without your input. And just from what I know about each of you on the Mobility Commission, you're so dogged in your focus to make our streets and roads safer. So thank you as volunteers for devoting so much of your time and your passion to make sure that we can all get around safely. I got to thank James. Your presentation was really educational and inspiring. And I know you moved here several years ago with your family because you saw Encinitas as a destination where you could move about your community and feel safe outside of your car. And so you've added so much with that perspective, and we have a lot more work to do, but I think we're chipping away at it. I just had a couple points I wanted to make, and then a few questions. So let's see, where shall I begin? One thing that I do want to acknowledge is that we have poor behavior by both drivers and cyclists, but that doesn't diminish the fact that we're in the middle of a mobility revolution, as James reminds us, and we're not really going to go back. So when we do build these roads that are a little bit newfangled and sort of difficult for people who've been driving forever to figure them out, like the Leucadia streetscape, we're not building the road for the last 100 years, we're building the road for the next 100 years. And one of my first experiences, the first time I pushed my daughter in the stroller down that stretch of road, was I actually saw Sophia riding her bike and navigating that roundabout so expertly. And I just had such a feeling of relief because I saw a bike rider who was doing it well and could clearly educated on how to do that. So I think there's a little bit of responsibility because we do have our youth who are learning how to navigate these new colors on the road, new striping, new intersection controls. So there's responsibility for the rest of us who grew up in the age where we didn't have focused instruction on bikes and moving about our community to kind of catch up and figure that out. And I do think it's the city's responsibility to support that effort. So I really like the suggestion by Commissioner Johnson to have a brochure mailed maybe to each home so that we're kind of going over these resources and providing access maybe through QR code or however for these wonderful videos that we're putting together, which do educate on how to cross here, how to navigate an intersection. And as the speaker mentioned, for something like bike boxes, I need that education. I'm an avid cyclist, and I would still need to know how to do that. So I hope that for all of these improvements that we're making, we're also adding the educational resources so that we're giving people the tools to navigate them well. Another aspect that I would like to call out is that one of the hurdles we face as a city when we're trying to dedicate resources to bike safety is just finding the folks who are available to serve as our lead certified instructors. So we as a city are funding 16 positions for people who would like to be trained up and get this really critical education to then turn around and educate in our schools. And we need committed volunteers to do that. And the same is true for our crossing guard program. So the city cost shares crossing guards with our school districts so that we have eyes out there, and that really greatly improves the visibility for pedestrians making their way to school. So we need volunteers to step up to do that. And it's frustrating for me sometimes when I hear, oh, I was on Nextdoor and I read for 2 hours all about e-bike safety. I'm like, okay, I know that was probably a significant portion of your day that you were going down that rabbit hole and reading that, but how about devoting 2 hours instead to your school that's right around the corner and making sure that the kids are getting to and from school safely? So I think that's where we're going to need the community support on that. Let's see. I really support, thanks Abe for finding a way to lower the speed limit through a business district, and I support what Michael Von Neumann's asking for too. I know that's a needle to thread with losing the state funding and losing the maybe some of the taxes we get for repaving the roads, but if we're not going to be eligible for state funding on some of those streets that he called out, I do hope we can lower the speed limits there because that's the best way that we can ensure safety in the short term. And then I want to thank, he already left, but what Logan had to say was so helpful and so insightful. And it's just to the students who are giving us your perspective, truly, it means so much. And I think something that we often forget when we get a little bit older is that harassment that takes place when you're riding your bike and you're being so brave to be visible on the street and, adults are yelling at you and your fellow students are heckling you. I've experienced that as an adult riding my bike around, and what Logan said about the sharrows. Every time I ride in a sharrow, I know that somebody's going to yell at me for doing that. So in every place where we can, I think we should support educating, because I think that's where a lot of that bullying behavior goes away. And also to speak to the civility. It's both sides that sort of antagonize other for their mode share, but we need to have all modes able to use our roads safely. So that's all my comments, and then just my question is for Nick. So for those 16 lead certified instructor positions, have we made progress on finding folks who are able to do that, or are we still looking?
We have at least half of that count lined up for that program. There is a prerequisite for that certification course, which is another like 23 hours of instruction. I'm sorry, 8 hours of instruction. So there is a timeline to getting those things done. Some of the staff from our local B cycle operator and from a big company in Encinitas, Electra Bicycles, are going to participate in that LCI training with the intent of supporting our causes locally. So we're working on that head count. We also have others who are pursuing that, that prerequisite and then lined up for that November LCI training.
That's so great. Thank you. And then the last thing I do want to say, I know education was brought up a lot, and that we need to do that in schools. And as of this school year, both the high schools and the elementary schools are implementing instruction on school campus for every student on bike safety, and that's just kicking off. And so that's been heard, and that effort has advanced significantly since we started this discussion at the beginning of the year. So thank you, and that concludes my comments.
Thank you. And could the sheriff's captain comment on the reduced speed limits for business districts and residential districts? The city doesn't lose any ability to enforce the speed limits. They can be ticketed, and the tickets stand up. I know that if you lower a speed limit lower than the 85th percentile, you won't be successful in court.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to rely on my traffic expert that's behind me to answer that question.
Okay.
Thank you. So I guess if it's not on the state map, it can be the 25, and it is enforceable at that point, to my knowledge.
Okay, thank you.
And could be successful in court as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Deputy Mayor Lyons.
Thank you, Mayor Krantz. So I've heard some great information today. I want to start by welcoming our new mobility manager, Nick Buck, because I think that a lot of the things that I'll be asking for us to look at, I think he will be a primary contact for people to engage with as we move forward. First, I want to start by giving you my opinion about what we've done so far that's effective. I really like the CMS boards. I know that it's kind of, it's like these big boards. They're not all that pretty, but, it just reminds us every day when we're out that it's so important for us to be safe. I do want to say that I really, as far as the graphics and as the videos, I think the videos with our chief and our captain are compelling, and I'd like us to really go in that direction a little bit more instead of the graphic videos. I think they're a little abstract, those graphic videos. But it occurred to me while I was watching our chief and our captain in that video that we really need a video that focuses on the drivers of the cars. Very similar to this educational, this is what's important for you when you're out on your bicycle, on your e-bike, or on your bicycle. But where the gap is for me is on educating our community for how to be a good driver on our roadways, considering that there are many modes. It just calls so strongly to me as that's an important resource for us to add to our list of things that we've done. Thank you also for the bike diversion program. I know that took council action, and we really supportive of having the bike diversion program, and I'm glad to hear it reported that we're making a difference and getting people who have their first infraction to go through additional training, and I'm anxious to hear the outcome of how that goes over time as well. We really need to press on that. One thing I want to ask our youth commission to do or to consider doing is to, as you've heard, we're funding and we're trying to get good trainers to expand the educational programs in the schools. So we're totally engaged and committed to that. As we're doing that, if you have input into what's important to make sure we include in those training programs, maybe if there's anything that's somewhat nuanced that isn't already covered, if you already know the content of the programs, I would like us to be informed about what would be more compelling and more interesting and more educational to the cohort of students who are needing to take these educational training programs. So I would like to keep a door open there for the Youth Commission to communicate with our mobility manager on that through the proper channels here at the city. So I want to touch base on a couple of things. The bike boxes and the cross bike. That hit a resonance with me in that it's new. I understand how it could be a new safety, improve the safety for the bike at the intersections. But if we're doing more of this, that it puts striping and graphics on the roadway where people are already confused. It's imperative that we include the adult car driver and the car driver in general training as well as the bicyclist training, so that we're covering all the bases. It's just not the bicyclist, as I think we all know, who needs to be trained about these things. The very first, as far as what we do as we go forward, I like many of the ideas that are here, and I think there may be a few details that could be still worked out, as our speaker mentioned on Saxony. That's a very good idea to continue with the bike lane instead of the Sharrow. I like the continuity idea. So there may be a few tweaks like that I'm not going to go into right now, but that might have some merit as we're looking at the detail of what to do and how to afford it. But I come back to what is the quickest, I hope quickest, and cheapest thing for us to do that doesn't necessarily involve a lot of capital improvement money, and that is reduce our speed limits. And I agree with Judy Burlfine and the other speakers who mentioned this specifically, that it's the speed. And so I'll just say that I'm in favor of escalating that to a higher priority than spending capital improvement money, although that doesn't diminish this wish list, this goal of improving our roadways. But if we can quickly and inexpensively reduce our speed limits, I think that's the best way to move forward. So there are two things that we're already committed to doing here at the city. One is we have a Vision Zero policy, which is to commit to 0 fatalities on our roadways. And we are at the same time going in parallel with our Vision Zero goals and these goals to make sure we achieve that goal. We have also said that we're going to evaluate our Sharrow policy, and that's something that should be coming to a council agenda meeting sometime soon between now and the end of the year, because I think Sharrows are appropriate in some places and perhaps not appropriate in other places, and I think we deserve to have a public comment and public dialogue on developing a rigorous Sharrow policy. And then when we think out in the future, I want to propose two things. One is that we consider our bike infrastructure a little more broadly, in that how can we remove bike circulation from our roadways where the cars are? So if we can look broadly in the future, and this would take action beyond what we're considering right now, but to consider trails to school instead of safe routes to school associated with the roadways, and look at places where bicycles can go, and maybe this is a bicycle, not an e-bike thing, but this needs to be parsed out. Where can bikes circulate in connection and continuity in a loop perhaps throughout the city, especially associated with routes to school, so that they're not engaging in the same footprint as the cars are? So I challenge us to look at that. And Perhaps we could also look at pilot programs associated with safe routes to school where we close down lanes during school hours so that there's more safety and less interface between bikes and cars during the time when kids are coming to school and leaving school. There may be some precedent for that in other places where traffic lanes are closed down so that it will improve safety for the bicyclers in their routes to school. And that's it. Thank you. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Councilman Raylers.
Great. So Councilmember Hinsey said we're here for input, and I couldn't agree more. So I actually really appreciate the fact that the Youth Commission and the Mobility Commission are here. And I'd like to do a little exercise to help get more input, because I think we've got two demographics represented right in front of me that are really the target audience, the youth that are probably the majority of the e-bike riders, certainly the most active, and people that are very familiar both with e-bikes and vehicles. So first, by a show of hands, and everybody can participate, how many people have e-bikes? So quite a few, yeah. Oh yeah, thank you. That's okay. Now, out of everybody, how many people either are familiar with the rules of the road, either because they have a driver's license or they've taken an e-bike class? It's most everybody. Good. So this is really good input, because so apparently we're getting some e-bike classes out there, and so did the class, and I'm probably focusing more now. Sorry guys, I'm focusing more on the youth here, the Youth Commission. How did that teach you the rules of the road you needed, or did it not? You know, thumbs up, thumbs, you know, kind of. Where did you learn to navigate your e-bike safely? I loved Logan's story and who was it, Carter's. Those, thank you. I mean, those are the kind of anecdotal, helps us guide what we should do. But did you learn it in the classes? Did you learn it from parents? Did you learn, you know, do you feel you're still learning? Any sideways? I'm not getting a whole lot of thumbs up. Good news is I'm not. So, one of the things out of this is a direction to staff. Nick, I think we have Encinitas Bike Walk helping you with the videos. I think one of your one of your demographic groups is right there. If you could take it to the Youth Commission, I think, thank you for sitting here through all this, but I would love to give you a bite at that apple to review these videos. And I have to just disagree a little bit with what one of my fellow council members said, that the I too found that our sheriff and our fire chief are very convincing to a middle-aged or older man, right, or woman. But I'm really interested in what speaks to the youth, and that you give feedback to the videos. What kind of up-tempo, whatever, you know, cultural references, however we do it, I think you got that demographic. I'd like to see it, and you meet on a regular basis, so it seems like a natural step. Let's see. So great. So next, moving on. Thank you. Comments, Abe, with what you're doing there. I love the map. I think there's some great ideas in there. I think there's more feedback. So the first question is, I assume whatever you're proposing, that matrix you gave with the approximate costs, those will ultimately come back here to be approved and reviewed in detail, right?
Correct. Absolutely. I'm trying to think. Yeah, even the signs, yeah, pretty much all of them would have a design. The signs, usually we don't bring them to council, but yeah, I guess.
That's the last, I wasn't as worried about the signs.
No, the projects, pretty much all of them would have a design and will come for
the project. So just a couple things on the map. I love the fact you put the schools on there. There are two schools, OPE and LCC, that are not on the map that I think should be, because I'm always looking in the neighborhood of schools. I want to put as much focus on bike lanes and getting people out of cars and you know, safely to school, whether they're walking or riding. So if you could do that for me. What else was I? question about bike boxes, and it's a new concept to me, probably new concept to a lot of people. Does it sounds like the bike box, the way it's envisioned here, does not change the throughput of the intersection at all, or does it? Is there any timing change that's required in order to implement a bike box that would reduce our traffic throughput?
Not really, not really. If anything, the only thing that we would do, we have a few signals in the city that the minimum green that we have at those signals, trying to simplify, when a vehicle is detected at the signal, one leg of the intersection, let's say a minor leg, and the signal gets its green, our minimum green is usually set based on vehicle speed. So if it's 3 seconds of green and there's no other new car detected that leg, it turns to yellow and red to serve the major road. Sometimes this minimum green is not enough for a biker to clear the intersection. One advantage would be we would increase that minimum green, so even though there's only one car there, the green stays long enough for a bike to clear it.
Okay, so but it'd be pretty minimal is what you're
Yeah.
saying. Okay. And then when you showed the AB 43 downtown zone, I think you stopped right around the La Paloma, D Street. And I'm curious, is there any reason we wouldn't want to extend that down to Encinitas Boulevard and even possibly up the other side to maybe the first intersection? Because it seems like, in my mind, that all qualifies as a business district. And it seems like the hill and it gets a little wider and a little crazier down the hill and coming up. So
The bill changes how business districts were defined. I'm not 100% sure, but I think our staff looked into maximizing the length, maybe because it's 2-lane in each direction between B and Encinitas. Between D and Encinitas is why it wasn't included. Maybe the AB 43, I'm trying to remember, maybe AB 43 doesn't allow application of a business district to a 4-lane road, because there is a criteria that has to be met. Before, it used to be only the percentage of businesses in the length of the segment that would qualify. Now I think there's like 3 or 4 different, maybe a median is a factor. Because we have a median there, it doesn't qualify. But I can double check when we come back, because we have to come back if we are implementing a 25. If it can be extended, we'll make sure we extend it to the level to the length possible.
okay. And then the last area, and probably I think is one of the most important, I think my fellow council members have spoken this way, traffic enforcement. I can't tell you how happy I was to see that focused enforcement occur. And that concept, that was a new concept to me, and I think I can see where rotating around even the county, doing that to really get some of the drivers to wake up about speed and traffic enforcement, get some of the riders to wake up. I really appreciate that. As always, is there anything else we can do to help you increase enforcement? I'd love to hear your comments, Captain Lawrence.
I would just thank you for your support and allowing us to do some of these initiatives here. Not every city is receptive to those, so we appreciate that. And there may be some proposals that come for maybe next fiscal year with additional resources that might be requested to help us out in this endeavor to make the city safer. So.
Because I can see where that curve went, and we're hopefully seeing a flattening. Let's really hammer on that. And in support of our Vision Zero, I can see enforcement being a key component on both drivers and on riders. So
absolutely.
And last but not least, AB 530. Assemblywoman Berner is working on licensing. I think one of the questions that the state has to grapple with, we certainly, I think, should form some opinions and send it up to Assemblywoman Berner. But how young is too young to be on an e-bike in the roadway? And is that number 11 and under? Is it 8 and under? I don't know, but I think there's a lot of work the state has to do. As she pointed out to me, that it is the motor vehicle code is absolutely not our purview, not here. That is up there in the state, so we do have to get that through. So anything the public can do to help push through some added regulations on e-bike ridership and training. I think that's the ultimate solution, although we have to apply all these solutions to get to Vision Zero. So thank you, and thanks for the input, too.
Commissioner Wong.
Thank you. Jim Wong. I'm on Traffic Commission. So first of all, I really want to thank this council for having this meeting, because so far, our many decades, our infrastructure has been focused on cars. And as Sergeant Collis told us on Monday, and I'm sure Captain Lawrence will verify, bicycles are vehicles too, with full rights and responsibilities. Often responsibilities are violated, but that's on both sides. I also want to thank other speakers, because about 75%, 80% of what I want to say has already been said, and I'm not nearly as eloquent as they are. So I want to thank Councilmember Hinsey for saying that we are actually building our infrastructure for the next 100 years, not for the past 100 years. And I think that, as Commissioner Collins said, e-bikes are kind of the future. So we should be looking for the next 100 years. I also want to thank Councilmember Lyons for saying that mutual respect is what's important. That would be the most important thing for improving safety, is mutual respect between cars and bikes. And I don't think that really exists right now, as so well described by, I'm sorry, I forgot his name, our 9th grader, who said that cars often do not respect bikes at stoplights or Sherrills. So I also wanted to thank our engineer, Bannigan, for all the work he's done on the map. And as Councilmember Engler said, it is a lot of work. The map is really helpful. I do have a few suggestions about that, because I think some of the bike boxes, there could be more of them, like our most prominent intersections, such as ECR and Lucadia Levenhain. That one's a really busy intersection, it's a wide intersection. Often the traffic detectors, signal loop detectors, will not detect bikes. That's why both roads are really wide, so it takes a long time. Often the signal timing is not long enough. There's also Encinitas Boulevard and Coast Highway, Encinitas Boulevard and ECR. Those are all busy intersections, and bikes use them as much as cars, so they also ought to be friendly to bikes. As far as the bike boxes, I like those. I've actually done my own sort of bike boxes. I just cross one way and wait for the other light to change. But I hope with the bike boxes, since bikes have the rights and responsibility of cars, I hope that they will have detectors so that the bike boxes can tell when there's a bike there, rather than bikes having to wait for cars. I've been actually advocating for this since Senator Blakespear was on the Traffic Commission, which is quite a while ago. So I still haven't seen those yet. There is a symbol in the MUTCD that says that if you put your bike here, then you have a good chance of triggering the bike signal. And that's often difficult to trigger the bike signal if you don't know where the loop is. And you can't tell where the loop is when the streets have been repaved. So I hope we can have some action on that so that bikes can actually trigger the bike signals.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Yes.
We were trying to wrap this up by 5:30. I think we had a youth commission that had homework to do. So if you could indulge me here now, I'd like to wrap up a little bit here. One of the things that came up was this conversation about the list of capital projects that Abe had and how to manage the cost of those. I think it's my preference that you utilize the money that we budgeted in those 3 accounts that you talked about, and try and accomplish all of that. And then as the year goes on, if we get to the point where we need to plus up any of those accounts, bring those projects forward, and the council will take action as we see fit. Is that something we all agree on?
Yes, I do support that, and I've said this to Abe in our own meetings, but I'd like to say it in public too, that I would like to see more protected bike lanes on some of these faster corridors, and so in the places where we have room, I hope we can apply for grant funding. I know we've received it in the past for protected lanes on Highway 101, but any of the ways that we can stretch those for ECR and Manchester and these other ones where we have high volume, both cars and bikes, would be wonderful. Thank you.
And I couldn't agree more. I think that it's really important that we have the opportunity to focus on some of these corridors, like Encinitas Boulevard is big and wide and a really critical street for getting from the east side of town to the west side of town. And what ways can we make that safer so that more people are comfortable getting on their bikes to come west? I also want to thank Judy Burlfine for her comments specifically about order and clarity. I think that that's what's missing a little bit in both ways. The order, you know, when you see a group of cyclists that are riding the wrong way down the street, or they're going in and out of cars, and you know, that lack of order is really difficult for motorists to deal with. And so how we can emphasize the need for that, the order. I also think that it's important that we have more clarity. I rode my bike up to the Botanic Garden the other day, and as I was going up Leucadia Boulevard to the east, I noticed that there was a young man riding his bike on the north side of the street, on the sidewalk, riding a wheelie, and he rode the whole way up on one wheel, which I was very impressed with. But I think in reflecting on that, I don't think what he was doing was illegal, because I think that you can ride on the sidewalk as long as you're not in a business district, according to our city ordinance. Maybe you're not supposed to be on the wrong side of the road, but maybe that was illegal, and we don't currently have a law against riding wheelies. So I think that, you know, the idea of clarifying those questions, I think, in everybody's mind is very important. I would not encourage anybody to be riding wheelies on an e-bike. And you know, I think probably the best part was that he was on the sidewalk and not risking running into cars. But in the meantime, that question of clarity is really important. Somebody told me it's legal to ride a bike through pedestrian crossings. So on the scramble crosswalks in downtown Encinitas, I was riding my bike in order to be able to cross, essentially make a left turn from 101 onto E or D Street. And then I found out that I guess I'm supposed to be walking my bike. And so again, clarity is really important. So I think the educational efforts that are being made, the bike walk group, state code, our sheriff's department, these are all pretty important efforts that are being made. And I know we have a long way to go, but I think it's really important that we continue to emphasize the fact that we want our city for people to believe we can ride and walk as a mobility solution. I think it's really critical. Deputy Mayor Lyons, something quick?
Just quick. I agree with everything you've said, Mayor Kranz, but I don't want to conclude without touching back on the speed limits concerns. It's, I think, a very high priority to look at reduction of our speed limits where we can across our city, as has been presented here. And I just want to put that forward to see if that's something you will also be recommending. And we do have a commissioner.
Sorry, June Hansberger, Chair of Traffic Commission. This is something we talk about a lot, and not only reducing, but just currently enforcing what we have. And Sheriff Collis brings this up at our meetings, that we need more enforcement of even the current speed limits that we do have. So yes, I agree, reducing is fabulous, but just enforcing what we already have, because Abe has worked to lower speed limits on many streets currently, and we need more enforcement. And we actually we're sending a request to you guys for maybe a few more sheriffs to actually motorcycle patrol our streets. So anyway, sorry, I know we're trying to wrap up. That's all.
Thank you.
So yes, tonight's meeting I thought was important to bring the Youth Commission in to hear from them. And I wanted to make it a joint with the Traffic Commission as well. We will have agenda items into the future to talk about things like speed limits and how to reduce them, more capital projects perhaps, looking at how to do more protected bike lanes. I know that we were looking for things that we could accomplish quickly, and more protected bike lanes is not something that we're going to do quickly. So there will be more conversations about issues related to bike safety so that we can, number one, continue our quest towards Vision Zero and accomplishing that, and also to continue to focus on the fact that we think people being able to ride bikes and walk as a mobility solution is really important to us as a community. So there will be more conversations. I thank everybody here tonight for your efforts in spreading the message that we need to focus on safety, and we need to engage our youth, and hopefully we can make some progress. We also will have, the end of the emergency is approaching, so before the end of the month, we'll have an agenda item that talks about whether to extend that emergency. So there may be some other bike business that we conduct when we have that agenda item. So with that, I would like to again thank everybody for being here tonight to speak, and we are adjourned.